discussed a few things so far today. We've discussed the benefits of homework. We've also discussed really how long and how often we should see kids. And now what we're going to talk about is not only what to teach, but also maybe how to teach it as well. So to talk about the impact of curriculum and associated instructional practices on student engagement and school culture is Michael Allen and Tara Osinski. If you click while it's on the arrow, it'll work.
Perfect. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mike Allen. I teach at 7th grade literacy at Elm Street.
And I'm Tara Osinski, and I teach science, 7th grade at Elm Street. Okay, so the catalyst for our project really came from these guys. These are our Student Voice students. So Student Voice is an organization that we run at school where we meet to talk about kind of what's happening and students share their perspective. Our goals are really to develop that student agency and impact the climate of our school by including our students, our constituents, in the process.
One of the things that came up a lot in that group was this activities that go on in the classroom. And last spring we took this the district survey about school climate, and there were a couple things that kind of upset us as teachers. In our building, over half the staff felt that student morale was low. Over half the staff felt that students didn't feel safe. Just over half the staff felt that there was a positive, respectful environment towards students. So this fall, we were really concerned about our school's climate with the students.
So we wanted to dig in and see if this was actually the case or this was staff perception. We also talked a lot with our Student Voice students about what made a difference from class to class. Classes where they were really engaged and excited to be in versus classes where they weren't feeling so. And we found the number one thing that students talked about was respect in relationships. So if they felt valued by their teachers, respected, and like they had a positive relationship, they were going to do better in that class. And also, students talked about instructional strategies that were effective. Did they feel like what they were learning was connected to their life outside of school and their future goals? So we really wanted to dig in and try and figure out how do we impact positive classroom culture and in turn our school culture. And our answer is to tackle engagement, get kids excited about.
So between our staff survey and our Student Voices ideas and all of that, we came to the idea, how can we figure out this problem? How can we engage our students? And the thing we thought about was, what is the impact of our curriculum and the associated instructional practices associated with curriculum on the student engagement, and how does that affect our school climate?
So engagement can be thought of in three kind of subcategories. There's the behavioral engagement, which is what we think of as like school spirit, right? Participation in the classroom, participation in those extracurricular activities. There's also that emotional engagement, sort of the peer-to-peer relationships, adults and student relationships. And then, of course, there's the cognitive engagement. Are our students curious and invested in their learning, which is really kind of the realm that we focused on in our research.
So why does engagement matter? Every piece of research from the last 20 years shows that there are positive connections between how engaged students are in their learning activities and their social and academic outcomes. And that goes across all demographics. And as we become more and more diverse, that's extremely important. There's also a negative correlation between those students who are not engaged in class and learning activities and negative behaviors and negative academic outcomes moving forward until they eventually become disengaged from school and leave us entirely.
And we found that the middle school years are really pivotal for engagement. So students in elementary school are typically much more engaged, and then when they come in 6th grade, we see kind of a steady decline in engagement. So this is kind of the make or break them period. We can turn them on and get them excited about learning, or we can turn them off completely. Now we know as teachers, we often feel really overwhelmed. So we're not just teaching our curriculum, we're also providing sort of social support for our students. Maybe we're helping them deal with interpersonal problems. And I've heard kind of here and there, like, oh, now we have to entertain them too. It might feel like just another thing on our plate. But the amazing thing about engagement is that it is empowering. It is something that we have control over when so much of what takes place in our students' lives we have no control over. It's also budget neutral. We don't need any additional funds to really increase that engagement. So it comes down to this really essential question. Are students running into your classroom? Are they excited about what you have to offer, or are they running out?
So we've got this giant question. Now we want to know, what does effective engaging instruction look like? And the research shows that there are 4 really common characteristics to really effective engaging instruction. Students need to be asked interesting questions, presented with real-world problems, to challenge them to really learn the material. They need to dive deeply into that material, not just gain a surface DOK1, DOK2 knowledge of it, to really move into those deeper steps of learning. Then they need to be asked to apply what they've learned to a real-world situation, to make it authentic for them. And then finally, they need to reflect and discuss what they've learned with their peers, so they can acquire the memory of what they've learned and build on it moving forward. So, how do we track this data in our classrooms? We found in our research there were 3 common indicators of student engagement in daily lessons. They're understanding what you learned today, remembering what you learned today moving forward, and being able to apply it somewhere else. So we made a simple exit ticket that we gave to our students every day after class. We created a ton of data, and the students filled them out every day. How well you understand what you learned today? How well do you remember? Will you remember what you learned today? And then how well will you be able to use it outside of class?
And that was really key, because that's the difference between sort of strategic compliance, doing school well, and really being engaged.
Yep. Then we were working with our student voice students, and they came to the realization that there were only 20 or 30 students of 1,100 in the building. They were already wanted to create a survey, and we said, that sounds awesome. So we decided to use them to help our project here. So we went through a whole bunch of different surveys, and we found the middle grade survey of student engagement developed by Indiana University and the National Association of Independent Schools. It's been administered in over 2,000 schools. And they kind of chopped it up and pulled out the pieces that they really wanted to know about, that we could really focus on with our instruction, as well as how they feel about school, to improve Elm Street. We also used grades, as well as common assessments and iReady scores to measure the results of our instructions. And our survey and all of the information we gained, we kept the board policy ILD in mind. It was completely academic in nature.
Okay, so in my science classroom, I really wanted to take those 4 principles of authentic instruction, and I took one of my units, it was on reproduction and genetics, and create sort of this hands-on, fully immersive problem for students to solve. So thus I give you the baby swap. So students came in, and they were challenged to, over the course of 6 weeks, solve a mystery where babies, after a natural disaster, were separated from their parents in the hospital, and they had to apply heredity and genetics to make the right matches, to make sure that the parents went home with their charming baby boys. So to measure engagement, we used our 3-prong exit tickets. And then I had a colleague teach the same daily lessons without framing them in terms of the story. And we measured engagement after the same lessons. So we did like the same PowerPoints, we did the same hands-on activities, the same readings in the book. The only difference was really the narrative story as background. Same demographics of kids. And what we found was that students who had the narrative reported higher levels of engagement, and the biggest difference was in that application. They felt that what they were learning connected to their lives and connected outside school. And then we used 2 different common assessments, and 5 out of in all classes except for 1, the students with the narrative framework outperformed academically the students who didn't have the narrative to tie their learning back to.
In literacy, the way my classes are set up, I teach both 7th and 8th grade. I have 3 7th grade classes and 2 8th grade. They're all extensions. So I broke my students into 2 groups. Group A was 2 7th grade classes and 1 8th grade class. Group B was one 7th grade class and one 8th grade class. With students in the Group A, I taught the same unit to both groups. Group A, I modified the curriculum unit, Study Sync Unit 3, Just as Served. I added in choices, I added in discussions, I added in open-ended questions. I asked them to investigate and ask questions and go find answers and come back and show us and share where you're learning. And then I also had them apply it to the real world. In the other group, I used the Study Sync. They did the same readings. They answered the same Study Sync questions out of the book without all of the extra stuff. The students in Group A reported being more highly engaged by about 10%. And based on 3 common assessments here, their trimester 2 grades, the common assessment at the end of the unit, and the iReady growth from September to January, the students in Group A who reported being more engaged drastically outperformed the students in Group B.
So then we wanted to take our measures of engagement to the school at large.
So our student voice kids modified that survey. They came up with the idea to introduce the survey to the whole school themselves. We had grade level assemblies during advisory, 3 days in a row. They got up in front of the 6th graders and gave a rah-rah speech about how they were going to take the survey and inspire the school and make changes. And they did it every day. They were most nervous about the 8th graders, but they did a great job. We ended up getting 699 responses, which was about 65% of the student population, and the results were very, very revealing, and we got a ton of data.
So the first thing, one of the things that kind of started our project were those perceptions of how students felt, and what we found is that staff was pretty off in how they felt that students felt. So about 83% of our students felt strongly or agreed that they felt safe at school. 87% felt that they were supported by the adults. 87% again felt like their teachers were really trying to engage them, and 94% of our students felt like they had the skills and ability to do their schoolwork. Some really positive results there.
Some other general patterns in the data. We found a general decline from 6th grade through 8th grade in engagement. We also found a decline in achievement. The students had to answer self-report their achievement in their academic grades. And there was an increase in the number of students who said that they were not achieving between 6th and 7th grade. There was disparity between the levels, honors, extensions, foundations, across almost all of the indicators. But there was no or limited difference in how they felt about learning and their curiosity of other things. They all said 70%. Schoolwork makes me want to learn other things.
Okay, so we wanted to know what kind of activities get them excited, and it really mirrored those authentic instructional practices and what we found in our own classrooms. So top-notch across all the levels was hands-on activities, and then those activities where they could delve deeper into things, group projects, being able to work collaboratively and discuss ideas were our top activities students reported. So then we wanted to see how often are we actually using these effective strategies, and we do a really nice job of those collaborative activities. So as you can see, almost 90% of our students reported that they regularly worked in a group or were asked to answer questions or work with other people to complete a task. We get a little bit lower on this end when we're talking about discussing questions without clear answers, which is another one of those authentic instructional principles, with only about 77% of students reporting that we do that, which kind of segues into our next piece of data.
When we were looking, a series of the questions in the survey was about what students thought, their teachers thought was important in the instruction. And when we were breaking out this data, we started to see this trend. All of the groups think that their teachers think it's important to understand ideas and to memorize facts. But then these groups start to kind of separate. 96% of the honors students said thinking critically was important to their teachers, but only 84% of the extensions and only 75% of the foundation students. Similar kinds of separation in write and speak effectively. Our lowest 2 indicators in all of the questions about what we thought was important was being creative, all less than 87%, and learn for my future, which was actually consistent across all 3 levels. That's the only one in the entire survey.
So we also wanted to look at kind of how students felt in the school, their social value, because we know that that has a huge impact on engagement. And we saw the same type of pattern emerging. So as far as being supported by other students, we see 76% of our honors students reporting that, with only 57% of our foundations. Opinions respected, similar patterns. 74% of our honors students, 60% of our foundations. This green category over here are our low achieving students, so students who identified as getting mostly D's and F's, we can see have the lowest social values. So again, we really see that connection between achievement and engagement. We wanted to take a look at too, because sometimes there's a myth that some students maybe are not motivated, and that's why they're not engaged. But students themselves said, and it's pretty similar across all 3 levels, that they put forth a great deal of effort when doing their schoolwork. So 93% of honor students, and if you look, foundations and extensions, both 84% right there. So it wasn't so much that it was motivation that was maybe affecting some of these emphasis questions. 2 things emerged as being the most motivating factors for our students. One was good grades, and the other was that desire to succeed in the world outside the classroom.
And that's important because that was one of the 4 principles of engaging instruction, looking to the future. So when we looked at this other question about how often have you talked to an adult about your future, 54.8% of students reported that they had rarely or never spoken to an adult about their future. That's one of the 4 principles of engaging instruction. And 54% have never spoken to an adult in the building about their future. That's something that we need to change.
And when we dig in a little bit deeper, again with that application, there's really no difference between the levels here. Actually, foundations reported a small percentage higher of seeing how the work that they were doing at school applied to their life outside of school. So this is really an area of focus where we need to make explicit to our students how the skills and content that they are learning is going to connect to where they want to go with their life.
So we started with a really big question and it really turned into 3 projects. And I have so much data still to go through, it's ridiculous. So moving forward, our student voice group is going to share our data and what they've learned from it with our building leadership team on Wednesday. And then hopefully we can move forward and share their perspectives and what we learned from this data with our faculty probably in the fall. We're going to continue to analyze some of the issues that I see in the data between levels. The disparity is rather large in the teacher's emphasis on learning. All of the foundations students reported about 10% lower than their peers in extensions and honors. And then another worrisome fact was that foundations reported significantly lower feelings that they are supported by peers and that their opinions are respected. So those are some things at a building level I think we need to look forward to. For our recommendations, based on that whole last slide about foundations, we need to investigate leveling at the middle school level. Especially with those students who are not as high achieving, who we have labeled foundations, they are not enjoying the school climate that the rest of our students are enjoying.
We also really want to empower teachers, empower them to make those decisions that are going to be best for their students, keeping in mind those authentic instructional practices. We want to encourage them to really make that connection between what students want to do with their lives and what they are learning here at school, and make sure that we're creating the type of learning activities that support those higher cognitive tasks, being creative, thinking critically, really increase those types of activities.
We need to be incorporating student voice into our daily activities, especially at the middle school level where they're starting to develop their own thoughts, opinions, perceptions on the world. We can't be denying their voice. We need to incorporate it into our daily activities and let them make choices about what we do in our class.
And keeping that in mind, we think student evaluations would be really useful in sort of targeting professional development, because who better to assess our areas of strength and areas that we could improve upon or opportunities for us than those individuals who see us every single day. We also want to thank everyone at school who supported us, so our kids, our colleagues, our administration who was super supportive throughout this process. Questions or comments?